What's up, moviegoers? Welcome to the Marchio podcast. I'm your host, Anthony. In this episode of the Marchio podcast, I'm talking about A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. It is the third installment in the Nightmare on Elm Street film series and tells the story about a psychiatrist who is familiar with the knife-wielding demon, Freddy Krueger, as she helps teens at a mental hospital battle the killer who is invading their dreams. The movie was directed by Chuck Russell, who later went on to direct The Mask in 1994. The screenplay is written by Wes Craven, and the story is by Wes Craven. The movie was released February 27th, 1987, has a runtime of 96 minutes, had a budget between $4.5 to $5 million, and grossed $45 million at the box office. Now, what makes this third movie the best, in my opinion, in the franchise, is because the original director and writer, Wes Craven, returns to write the screenplay. You can tell the elements of Wes Craven were put into this movie, which is why this is a very, very underrated and one of the most underrated horror movies of all time. And how Chuck Russell directed it definitely also garnered a huge positive review from critics. And basically what happened was that we find out that A Nightmare on Elm Street 2 was a critical and financial failure for New Line Cinema, and it was unsure if they would continue with the series. While Wes Craven, who wrote and directed the original Nightmare on Elm Street, did not participate in the first sequel because he had not wanted the original to evolve into a franchise, but later he co-wrote the screenplay for the third installment with the intention that it would end the series. So the reason Wes Craven came back to A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 was to close out the story. Now, Wes Craven's very first concept of this movie was to have Freddy Krueger invade the real world. Krueger would hold the actors filming a new Nightmare on Elm Street sequel, but New Line Cinema rejected the meta-cinematic idea. But years later, Wes Craven's concept was brought to the big screen in Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Wes Craven himself would be unavailable to direct this third movie, as he was tied up with filming Deadly Friend around the same time. Now, before it was decided that Wes Craven's script was used for the third movie, actors John Saxon, who played the deputy in the first movie, and Robert Englund, who plays Freddy Krueger, wrote their own scripts for this third movie. In John Saxon's script, the story would have been a prequel story. Freddy would ultimately turn out to have been innocent, or at least set up for the murders by Charles Manson, who along with his followers would have been the main culprit of the murders. Freddy would have been forced by the mob of angry parents to make a confession for his crimes, which would enrage them further. After they so-called, lynched Freddy, he comes back to avenge his wrongful death by targeting the parents' children, which was John Saxon's script idea. Now, in Robert Englund's treatment, called Freddy's Funhouse, the protagonist would have been Tina Gray's older sister, who would have been in college by the time Tina was murdered and ends up coming back to Springwood to investigate how she died. According to Robert Englund, part of it later ended up being used in the pilot episode of Freddy's Nightmares, after the script had been lying around unused for several years. Now, the interesting thing about this movie is that Nancy Thompson, who played the main protagonist in the first movie, returns in this movie as the same character, but this time as more so as a therapist. She knows how Freddy Krueger works, and she wants to help these kids out to try and beat him. Along the lines, Patricia Arquette is also in this and plays a pivotal role, and Lawrence Fishburne is in this movie as well. Lawrence Fishburne plays Max Daniels. And the way Wes Craven captured this story was that it was to close out the characters and how everything worked. Because, as it stated, Wes Craven wanted to end the story, wanted to end the series at 3 movies. But that didn't happen because there were more movies after this one. But the thing that makes this movie the best is because, like I said, Wes Craven does return. The character of Nancy Thompson is back. And certain aspects and certain things are done where how the killings in this are great. There is a character in this who loves watching TV, and she's very paranoid. And Freddy Krueger comes on one of the television screens and manifests himself through this screen. And basically Freddy Krueger says, "Welcome to prime time, bitch," because she wanted to be an actress or this and that. And she got her fame. And Lawrence Fishburne runs in and sees that she is dead through the television set. So basically, the way certain things are done, certain characters that were in the first movie are killed off. It's different, which is why Wes Craven did return to close out the story. And the way the story closes out is that it continues it into the next movie, which is different. I guess that was changed because, I'm pretty sure Wes Craven didn't want to continue the story, but evidently the ending was changed in order to do so. After this third movie, A Nightmare on Elm Street Dream Warriors, the so-called franchise took a turn for the worst, in my opinion. This is where the movies should have ended. This is where everything should have stopped. And this is where everything should have just been final. This should have been called Freddy's Final Hour or Night, or Freddy's Final Nightmare, or that title should have been used here, and that's it. But of course, when you say final this, final that in a horror movie, and the next one, they return. So I did like this movie for what it was. The writing was great, the dreams were great, the way Robert Englund interacted with every single character was different, and seeing Heather Langenkamp come back as Nancy was fantastic. Patricia Arquette is a very underrated actress at the time, and she showed that. And some of these traps and things that were happening in this movie were gruesome, different, and weird. But it was all fun to watch. This is my favorite of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, and I just love it a lot. And because I just love it because Wes Craven came back. Now let me know in the comment section below what you think about A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors. Do you like it? Do you think it's the strongest entry in the film series? Or do you think it's the weakest entry in the film series? And tell me why. And did you like how Wes Craven came back to write this movie? Let me know in the comment section below about the questions I just asked. And be sure you tune into the next episode of the Marchio Podcast, where I talk about A Nightmare on Elm Street 4. The Dream Master. And be sure you click that subscribe button and hit that notification bell for new videos and new podcast episodes on the Marchio Productions YouTube page. And follow Marchio Productions on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And follow me, Anthony, your host, on Instagram and Twitter at misterfilmstock. And follow the Marchio Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I'll leave a link to all the social media accounts in the description box below. You can check it out and follow along. Alright everyone, that does it for today's episode. I'm your host, Anthony. Thanks for tuning in.
This is it, Jennifer. Your big break in TV. Welcome to prime time, bitch.